A warm welcome to this video titled, Is Three-Eye Atlas the Doomsday Comet? Let me say this up front. This might be the most important video we've ever released. Every single publication we've made so far was necessary to learn how to understand God's voice from heaven. But the consequence revealed in this video is unique and unmatched. Nothing else compares to it in recent history. You'll see. Stay with us and judge for yourself at the end. But first, here's a quick overview of our last 4 publications. On the left, you'll see our Foundational Essentials video. You really must watch that one first. Without it, you won't be able to grasp the depth of today's message. That one puts the warning of the 3 woes and the 3 woes themselves in context with the biblical texts. Today we're focusing on Three-Eye Atlas. On the right, there's a short video that compellingly depicts the visits of the interstellar objects discovered so far, and it gives food for thought. It's a must-watch because it already hints to the answer to the title question of this video, and it does so in visual form. In today's video, I'll be using clips and images from that short video again and again. And here you can see the related article that goes along with the videos. It offers additional info, especially regarding the last 7 plagues within the 7th bowl of wrath. So again, for anyone watching this who's either new or who's forgotten what was shared in the earlier publications, please quickly get caught up with the current knowledge before continuing with today's video. This latest article is titled Elijah and the Silent Witnesses, and it was published on July 22nd and 23rd, 2025. So it's brand new, and it reveals who Elijah is, the one who is to come before the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and how the ascension of the 2 witnesses from Revelation 11 took place. Super exciting. Make sure to check it out. And let me ask just one slightly challenging question. We already know we're living in the day of the Lord, that is, the year of the Jubilee, since March 30th, 2025. And that would mean, by definition, that the real and true Elijah must already be here on the earth and active, turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and vice versa. So now the question. Do you know him? This is one of the final slides from our last video, where we explained the 3 woes in relation to the interstellar objects. Here we have One-Eye, Oumuamua, which issued the 3-woe warning. Then we have Two-Eye Borisov, which represents the first woe. Here is the newly discovered Three-Eye Atlas, which logically represents the second woe. That's now unfolding. And we still expect a 4th interstellar object. That will represent the Holy City when Jesus returns. And that, of course, will definitely be an interstellar object. So far, a quick refresher from the last video. Today, we're focusing in detail on Three-Eye Atlas. Here we have a timeline that gives an overview of the last video called Woe, Woe, Woe. We learned that the pouring out of the 7th bowl of wrath takes 3 lunar rounds, all connected to the fall of Babylon. And this all happens within the 70th Jubilee year. Now, let's mark where 3i Atlas was officially discovered and named. We already covered this in the last video. Here is July 1st, 2025, when 3i Atlas was officially discovered. Now, let's gather more info, like this from Wikipedia. 3i Atlas is an interstellar comet discovered while inbound by the Atlas station in Chile on July 1st, 2025. We read that it's moving incredibly fast at a relative speed of 61 kilometers per second. That's extremely fast. It follows an unbound hyperbolic trajectory, so almost a straight line, only slightly bent by the sun. It's the third interstellar object confirmed passing through our solar system, after 1i Oumuamua and 2i Borisov. So far, so good. From this short bit of text, we already learned that it's moving very, very fast, much faster than the other interstellar comets. That's why it follows this hyperbolic path, almost completely straight. And that already tells us this is a one-time visitor, an object that won't ever come back to our solar system. Over here on the right, you can see a little animation of the path of 3i Atlas. And it clearly shows, visually and graphically, that this object is barely deflected by our sun at all, because it's so massive and so fast. Let's keep reading in Wikipedia. 3i Atlas will come to perihelion on October 29, 2025. The comet's velocity suggests it originated in the thick galactic disk, which contains many older stars, and therefore the comet may be water-rich and could be more than 7 billion years old. Because of its extreme speed and hyperbolic path, the visitor must be very old. So here we have it, 7 billion years old, far older than our Earth or solar system, which are about 4.5 billion years old. So we're starting to get the sense that this object is on a special mission. On the right, I've added a few data points showing when 3i will be nearest to certain celestial bodies. Now, let's read about the history of the discovery of 3i Atlas. Please read this part from Wikipedia. In short, after the official discovery on July 1st, astronomers went back through earlier telescope data to see if they could spot 3i at an earlier time, even if they hadn't known what it was back then. I've roughly marked those dates mentioned in the text, graphically here in the chart. And here's the last sentence. This astronomer says the comet could only be seen starting from June 25, 2025, because before that it was passing in front of the galactic center's dense star fields, where the comet would be hard to discern. But from June 25 onward, it was visible and started showing up in the images. So I've marked those time frames here. And what do we see? Once again, our well-known June 25 shows up right in the middle of all these observations. And what do we already know about June 25? I'm reading here from Revelation 10, verses 5 and 6, where this angel here swears that there should be time no longer. Or, in other words, no more delay. And we already knew that from the great and marvelous sign. And we've always connected that to June 25. That alone is already super interesting. And it implies a lot, since it was exactly at that moment that 3-Eye Atlas became visible, a visitor sent by God from far away at exactly the right time. But it gets even more interesting. Let's find out more about 3-Eye Atlas. Right here it says, astronomers says the object approaching us from beyond the solar system is not what we think. Sent toward the inner solar system by design. So what is it then really? What does it mean that it was sent by design into the solar system? And this is being said by astronomers, most of them unbelieving scientists. So now, let's find out what it really is, biblically speaking. Let's read this part here. Although NASA leans toward the comet theory, the object's size and the directed movement still raise questions. The true nature of 3-Eye Atlas remains unknown. Scientists are continuing to study it as it moves closer to the Sun. While many accept the comet theory, Loeb, one of the astronomers, believes the unusual characteristics are worth deeper investigation. So yeah, they're puzzled. They're not all in agreement about what this really is. Its features are definitely different from the earlier comets. By now we know it's huge, at least 10 times bigger than 2-Eye Borisov. It shows an extreme speed. It's incredibly old, and it became visible at a very, very specific time. Let's read further. Asteroids and comets can have all sorts of orbits, but they are still circumnavigating the Sun. This object, though, was moving too rapidly and in a very elongated manner, which indicated it is not bound to the Sun's gravity and will never pass through our solar system again. So we already know it's a one-time visitor. It won't come back. And there over here on the right, we read, there are also hints that the object is somewhat red, a telltale sign that it's made of primeval matter that coalesced during the early days of its planetary system. So it's probably an extremely old geologic time capsule. Wow! Reddish color and something like a time capsule? And again, this is what scientists are saying. Astronomers, not necessarily believers. Let's read the article below. Snapshot of a new interstellar comet. 3-Eye Atlas has a red and featureless spectrum. And right here in the middle, these observations confirm the cometary nature of 3-Eye and reveal a red coma, redder than most solar system comets. So, what could this reddish color mean? Especially now that we know the sign of the Son of Man has already fully formed, that the mu of the Euphrates is already dried up, that we're in the 7th bowl of wrath and in the 3 hours of Babylon's fall, and that in the last video, we already connected 3-Eye Atlas with the second woe. So, what's happening in heaven at the end of the investigative judgment? What is Jesus doing? And what final actions is he taking in the most holy place and in the holy place at the close of the heavenly day of atonement? What is reddish and comes from interstellar space, sent by God? Watch these few seconds from the short video, The Seventh Trumpet Begins to Sound. Do you now understand what our high priest Jesus is doing in heaven, or has done? Did you recognize it? Let's read the corresponding Bible text. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. Do you understand now what's happened up in the heavenly sanctuary? Jesus has thrown the censer with the coals. And three-eye Atlas, with its reddish color like glowing coals, is the sign showing us what's going on, so that we can see it and understand it. Are you aware that no high priest has ever thrown the censer before? Not on earth and not in heaven. Do you realize that this only happens once? And that's at the end of the intercessory ministry. I'd say this is a bombshell, thunder, earthquake kind of message, if I can put it like that. For God's children, those who've listened to his voice from heaven, it's good news. Because it means our Lord is coming very soon. Hopefully, they're ready and awake. But for many, this message will probably come as a shock. They didn't know that a decision had been made in heaven about both the dead and the living. I hope it's clear that once the censer has been thrown, the point of no return has been crossed. The die has been cast, like Julius Caesar once said. There's no going back. This is final. The question is no longer if the coals will hit the earth, but only when. Remember, this heavenly woe messenger, three-eye Atlas, is also showing us the second woe, with great destruction. So let's just say this clearly. All the warnings we've tried to give so far were not a joke. Even if some viewers or followers have become impatient, we're just thankful that God held back these coals as long as he did. But now it's happened. Let this slide, this heavenly proclamation, sink in for a moment. There's a parallel verse that goes with this heavenly scene. We find it in Ezekiel chapters 9 and 10. Let's first read from chapter 9 on the left. And the glory of the God of Israel was gone up from the cherub, whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side. And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. That was verses 3 and 4. This is about a sealing process. We've mentioned so many times how Jupiter, during its 12-year circuit through the Mazzaroth, represented the sealing of the living in the heavens. Now let's read on the right, Ezekiel 9, verse 11. And behold, the man clothed with linen, which had the inkhorn by his side, reported the matter, saying, I have done as thou hast commanded me. This verse clearly shows that the sealing is complete. So what happens next in chapter 10? Let's read Ezekiel 10:2. And he spake unto the man clothed with linen, and said, Go in between the wheels, even under the cherub, and fill thine hand with coals of fire from between the cherubims, and scatter them over the city. And he went in my sight. Now let's also read verse 6. And it came to pass that when he had commanded the man clothed with linen, saying, Take fire from between the wheels, from between the cherubims, then he went in and stood beside the wheels. This picture here comes from the Orion presentation from back in 2010, a must study. Here we have Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka, the belt stars, the three thrones in the most holy place. Even back then, we already understood that Orion represents this wheelwork, this clockwork. How many times have we talked about the heavenly temple? Who was really listening? Who took it seriously? So, what ends before the coals or the censer are thrown down to the earth, or rather, to the city of Jerusalem? The sealing of the 144,000. And until these literal coals, whatever they turn out to be, arrive, the 144,000 will still lead many to righteousness, just as it's described in Daniel chapter 12. That brings us to the next event, one we've talked about so often. Let's start by reading Daniel 12:1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was, since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book. So Jesus must stand up from the investigative judgment, meaning he's completed it, in order to come to our aid and to deliver us. He must have stood up if he's throwing the censer. And there's another verse we need to look at. Because when the cases of the living are decided in heaven, it also means the following. Revelation 22:11-12. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still, and he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work shall be. This verse confirms that no one changes any more. Just as they were at that one moment in time, that's how they remain. They've made their decision. Do you see that a certain door has closed here? Do you realize the heavenly day of atonement has ended, and with it, intercession? Do you know which door, or better said, which curtain, I'm referring to? The movement in heaven we're talking about here is that Jesus, as high priest, has left the most holy place and returned to the holy place. That door, or veil, is called the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That's what Jesus said. This picture here is from some of our older videos. We've explained it again and again. In the holy place, the censer is used to carry the coals from the altar of burnt offering to the golden altar, where the prayers of the saints are offered before God's throne. That's part of the continual priestly service. And when the censer is thrown to the earth, it means the heavenly priestly ministry has ended. By the way, 3-eye Atlas also represents the second woe, which is connected to the sixth trumpet. You already know that. Let's read that verse, Revelation 9:13-14. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. Where is the golden altar again? Here is that altar. Where is the voice coming from? From right here. Exactly at the place where the censer is needed to continually bring the coals so that the prayers of the saints are acceptable. Now, the releasing of the 4 angels is supposed to happen according to the hour, day, month, and year. I explained that in the last video. Do you see how all these Bible texts are linked? And how suddenly everything falls into place? Do you see how significant the appearance of 3-eye Atlas is? So, what does the priest do after his service is finished? He changes clothes. He takes off the priestly garments and puts on his royal robes, because Jesus is coming back as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This image here is from the article, The Books Are Closed, from back in 2018. You all know that it took us until 2025, until now, to fully understand the voice of God from heaven, so we could correctly interpret the time periods mentioned in Revelation. But what we already recognized back then was that the change of clothes of the high priest as Orion happens in the constellation of Gemini in this context. Here we have the high priest shown, and here the king, the lion. And in between is the moment of the change of garments. And that's exactly what's happening now in 2025. In the past few days and weeks, God has sent us several dreams through which He lovingly showed us this hidden change of garments process happening in heaven. I'm just mentioning this as an FYI. I won't be going into detail about those dreams here and now. We saw the coals in Ezekiel being scattered over the city. And in Revelation, we see the censer, which is represented by 3-eye Atlas. But there are two more scriptural connections in Revelation that point to this hail of coals. Let's read Revelation 11:19. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament. And there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. Hail of coals. Hail of fire. This verse is at the end of the seventh trumpet. Now let's read Revelation 16:21 on the right. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. And men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. This text comes at the end of the seventh bowl of wrath, respectively of the last seventh plague. Once again, what exactly this hail of coals is will become clear when the time comes. But the unmistakable, interstellar, one-of-a-kind sign in the heavens is clear. The censer with coals has been thrown, and it's falling. We've now learned and understood a lot, and it's time to look at a summary chart to see the full scope and depth of what's been revealed. At the top, we see the familiar timeline of the sixth and seventh bowls of wrath, along with the two key dates, the time of the first images of 3-eye, and the official discovery of 3-eye. These 7 days mark a kind of transition period, one whose depth and importance will likely become the subject of the next and probably final article on this topic. Here we have Revelation 10:5-6. No more time, no more delay. We already know this point from the great and marvelous sign. Then we have Michael stands up. You remember we talked about that earlier and how from that moment on, the 144,000 are to lead many to righteousness, so that the number of the great multitude and the final martyrs is completed. Then we have Ezekiel 9, where we read about the end of the sealing. And here in Ezekiel 10, where we read about the coals being taken and scattered over the city. That's directly tied to the censer being thrown down in Revelation 8. And it's also a picture of the hail mentioned in Revelation 11:19 and 16:21. That's still to come at the end. Then we talked about the end of intercession and the end of the investigative judgment for both the dead and the living. We are in the seventh bowl of wrath, and there we read that this bowl is poured out upon the air. And you'll remember Jupiter represents the gas planet, or air. And right here, on June 25, the moon is poured out directly onto Jupiter. And what is the proclamation here? It is done. And now you know what was done. the censer became visible to us in the heavens. And that shows us that up in the third heaven, in the sanctuary, before God, it truly happened. So we've already talked about what has to follow, the change of garments. I've marked it here, and at the end, of course, and we'll come back to this date, we have the third woe. That's when 4I appears, the fourth interstellar object, which represents the holy city at the return of Christ. I hope this overview chart makes things clear and summarizes what we've learned so far. Now, let's take a quick look at the seventh trumpet, because at its conclusion, we also see hail mentioned. In Revelation 10, 5-6, we know that the angel declares, "There will be no more delay. The point of no return has been reached and crossed." Then comes verse 7. "But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished." You can see that here in the blue box. So the seventh angel is preparing to blow the trumpet. That means during this time, we don't yet hear the seventh trumpet, but he's taking a breath, so to speak, getting ready later to blow loudly. And during this time frame, this blue box, the mystery of God will be finished, most likely with this current video, and with the upcoming and probably final article that's already being written. That article will reveal exactly the events that have happened and will happen within this blue box, so that this question mark here disappears. On the night of July 23 to 24, the Lord revealed this final message to us, this last missing puzzle piece. You all know these events, but it's hard for all of us to tie them together in the biblical context. It's good that Elijah is here to help us. Praise the Lord. So stay tuned for that forthcoming concluding article. But first, the second woe must come to an end. Then comes the seventh trumpet. And the woe of the seventh trumpet is when salvation appears with 4I, and some aren't part of it, but have to face the hail instead. That's probably the worst woe of all, being left behind. Now, let's look up. Here's the path of 3I Atlas. And I've added here the 3 hours of the fall of Babylon, just to check if any parallels show up. 3I Atlas appears directly over Sagittarius, the rider on the white horse from Revelation 19 in this context. And it appeared right near the black hole Sagittarius A star, which stands for the Father. Here was 3I on the 28th of May, as the time frame for the seventh bowl of wrath began. You'll remember, Jesus stood up on June 25 to throw the censer. That's when we got the first images of 3I. And we already know that after the 3 hours of Babylon's fall, which end around August 18 to 19, justice will finally come, when the King of Kings appears and gathers his children to himself. And right at that time, in the firmament, we see that 3i activates Libra. That is more than interesting, wouldn't you say? Do you also see the Lamb here? Let's read the verse. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. The Lamb is, of course, Christ, the rider on the white horse. And here he's shown as Sagittarius. But also, remember, here's the cross, the wood to which Jesus was nailed in the year 31, right here near the Father, as you know. So who is it that makes war against the Lamb? And what biblical verdict of judgment from the Father and from the Lamb do we know from Babylon's history? Let's read Daniel 5, 25 to 28. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. So in this context of Babylon being weighed, Sagittarius represents the United States, fallen Protestantism, the second beast. One Mene along the path of 3i belongs right here in this first section of time. Ophiuchus, the serpent-bearer, represents the papacy in the Vatican. The second Mene applies to this section of time, and it applies to the first beast. Then we have Tekel. We recognized early on that in ancient times, the claws of the scorpion were considered part of Libra, the scales. So the biblical theme of weighing could start to apply from around August 11. And Peres, or Upharsin, falls right there where the weights sit in the scale. The earth is being returned into the hands of the true king of the earth, just like the text of the seventh trumpet expresses. Who is the king of the earth at that time? The returning Jesus Christ, the king, because it fits perfectly with this imagery. In the text of the sixth trumpet, which is connected to the second woe, we read about lion heads and fire, smoke, and brimstone, which are linked in the video, the last act in the drama, to Pope Leo XIV. Leo is lion, and the colors to the Swiss Guard at the Vatican. And Ophiuchus, who stands for the papacy, rides a beast. And the tail of that beast causes damage. Here's the beast that Ophiuchus is riding, the scorpion. Please go back and watch that video again. Read the sixth trumpet text again too. 3i Atlas appeared in the perfect spot and points 100% to this passage of the trumpet, or second woe. Dear friends, this is no coincidence. 3i passes through the three enemy constellations around the cross of Jesus. You could say Sagittarius stands for fire. Ophiuchus for the smoke screen of Leo, you remember from the video, and Scorpius for the brimstone. Definitely, ever since 3i Atlas appeared, the call for Armageddon has grown very, very loud. And the hour of temptation that's coming upon the whole world is right at the door. Now, I need to at least briefly touch on one more topic, even if I don't go into full detail. But it's important that you're aware. A few days ago, we published the article Elijah and the Silent Witnesses, where Brother Ray presented the topic of the two witnesses and showed how their ascension was portrayed in the heavens at the appointed time. I'm not going to dive into that topic here, but from the heavenly ascension of those witnesses, we can learn when the return of Jesus and the great general rapture will take place. In that article, Brother Ray explained that God sent us a dream in which he reminded us of the well-known comet C-2020 F3 Neowise, whose path you see in this image. For us, it was and still is the Comet of Elijah. And right at the two ends of its path, within 2 weeks, 2 novae appeared in special constellations. That's extremely rare. Actually, totally unique. Because both novae were visible to the naked eye at the same time. That's never happened before. You can Google it. Yes, there were 2 novae that appeared about 400 years ago, but they weren't visible to the naked eye. And on top of that, we were expecting the ascension of the 2 witnesses from Revelation 11 during this time. You can read all about it in the linked article. Please do, because as I said, there's going to be a follow-up or final article on this topic. But for now, I just want to show you on the timeline when these 2 novae appeared. You've seen this chart before. And now I've marked the 2 novae on it. The first one appeared on June 12th. And the second on June 25. That's the same time frame in which 3i was discovered and the first images were taken. And again, we see June 25 standing out. I'm just mentioning something now. The first nova was visible to the naked eye until about July 10. And the second nova was naked eye visible until about July 5. So perfectly aligned with that time frame. You can see how everything is converging right in the core period when 3i became visible. And all of this has deep meaning, which will be unpacked in detail in the next article. All of this, considering how unique it is, cannot be coincidence. Please stay alert and keep your eyes on the news. Or better, think about what has already happened in this time frame so far. Because after the ascension of the 2 witnesses, verses 13 and 14 follow until the second woe is past. That's when the great earthquake happens. The 10th part of the city falls. 7,000 people are killed in the earthquake. The remnant are affrighted and give glory to the God of heaven. There are 5 things we need to watch for. And in verse 14, it says the second woe is then past. Look to Syria, to Iran, to Ukraine, to the USA with all the players involved. Try to discern how God views the events on this world, both political and religious aspects. And remember, when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes. It is about this time period we're currently observing. Look forward to the next article. That's all for now about the two novae. Back to the dream. Here's the path of C2020 F3 Neowise, the Comet of Elijah. I've marked it here in green. In that same dream, God gave a hint about another comet, one we hadn't considered before, because it was very little known. C2020 F7 Lemon. I've marked it here in yellow. It was discovered on March 22nd, 2020, right here at the white dot. And according to the dream, this comet was meant to show us when the great general rapture would take place. By the way, F3 and F7 were discovered within 7 days of each other in March 2020. So, one after the other. And think about this. That was exactly when the first woe, meaning the COVID vaccine assault, was beginning to rage. In other words, God sent these two comets to already hint at the two ascensions during the first woe as a sign of hope. The ascension of the two witnesses through F3 and the great general rapture through F7. Isn't that incredible, what God is showing us in the heavens? Hopefully, throughout this entire video, you've already begun to realize that we are definitely in the very last moments, right in the midst of the fast-closing end-time events on this earth. And the full impact of the second woe disaster could unfold literally at any time now. We believe to know that we still have just enough time to publish the next article, but we are concerned that suddenly we might no longer be able to reach you. In fact, while I was creating this slide, Starlink went down worldwide. They said it was a cyber attack. That's how quickly things can happen, and suddenly we wouldn't be able to publish anymore. So, without diving deep into this next topic, we want to give you the date when, by grace, we are all meant to be taken up in the cloud. We're focusing now, of course, on F7. Do you notice where this comet comes from? Or more precisely, where it was discovered? In the lion of the tribe of Judah. Where did the tribe of Judah settle when the entire camp rested during their exodus from Egypt? Let's read Numbers 2, verse 3. And on the east side, toward the rising of the sun, shall they of the standard of the camp of Judah pitch throughout their armies. So in the east, of course. And that's exactly where the path of F7 begins, in the lion in the east. And where is it heading? What exactly is this F7? What is it meant to represent biblically? What if Jesus himself pointed to this comet when he was on earth? What if this comet appears in what's probably the most important chapter of the Gospels. What if this comet is the answer to one of the most burning questions the first apostles had? Let's read Matthew 24, verse 27. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Wow! F7 is that lightning. Jesus must have meant this. And it shines from the lion in the east to Aquarius in the Mazzaroth, which obviously must represent the west in this context. And without going too deep into the layout of the biblical camp order, which we have, of course, studied thoroughly, it would be amazing if Jesus himself showed us also the south and the north in this context. And he does, right in the very next verse, which anyhow has been a mystery for many. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. The carcass is simply a dead animal, a sacrificial animal on the altar. And by now, we all know that Taurus represents the altar of burnt offering, where the carcasses, the sacrifices, were consumed. And the eagle, the king of the heavens, is found, of course, on the opposite side of the galactic equator. It replaces Scorpius, which would normally be in that section of the Mazzaroth. So the tribal leader, Dan, who represents Scorpius, was replaced by Manasseh. Just a side note for completeness. Of course, the interpretation goes even deeper, because the eagles are also actors on the ecliptic. They gather around Taurus and point to very specific timings. Jupiter, for example, and the sun, which of course points to the summer solstice on June 21st up in Taurus. That date is critical for marking the beginning of the second woe. Hour, day, month, and year, remember? The moon is also one of those eagles. It has to appear in Taurus around the summer solstice too, because we also need it to determine the hour, day, month, and year of the second woe. I already presented this in the last video. Someone might object and say that the sun and the moon are there every year, and the moon even comes to Taurus every month. Correct? But the lightning doesn't happen every year, only once. And only when God sends it, at the exact right time. And Jupiter has to arrive there in Taurus too, after completing a full 12-year sealing cycle. And the woe warning from one-eye Oumuamua had to come first. And then two-eye Borisov, and the first woe had to come. And three-eye Atlas had to be seen as well. All of this is absolutely unique. And then comes the return of Jesus. In Matthew 24, Jesus explicitly refers to the woes, that the end begins with them. And anyone who can recognize and explain the woes is not a false prophet. And all these unique prerequisites first had to happen in order to even begin to understand those mysterious statements Jesus himself made. Again, he said many false prophets will come in that time, claiming this and that, but don't believe them unless someone can explain all these unique events, and those you should believe. I don't think you've ever heard these two oft-questioned verses of Jesus explained like this before. Did he know the time? Did he know that his Father had placed a clock in the heavens? Don't you also think that his advice to look up when these things begin to happen was given very intentionally? Shouldn't those voices fall silent now? The ones who claim that Revelation can't be deciphered, or the ones who say you don't need to understand the voice from heaven? I'd say Jesus himself silences them with this understanding, because with just these two verses, he proves that the answer to the disciples' questions must be shown in the heavens. God the Father has a clock in the firmament, and his Son knew it. Not a single word Jesus ever spoke is insignificant or should be overlooked. We could say so much more about Matthew 24, but time probably won't allow. But I still want to highlight one aspect from Matthew 24. Let's read verses 21 and 22. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. First, notice, it talks about a great tribulation, one that has never happened before. That's the same wording we see in Daniel 12:1, when Michael stands up. But now, let's focus on the shortened time. The lightning answers the question, how long was time supposed to run? Jesus uses the lightning to point to Aquarius in the west of the Mazzaroth. Here is a close-up of that lightning in the west at Aquarius. When does the lightning first reach the west? Roughly from February until July 2031. This lightning loop appears in Aquarius for the first time, and the tip of the loop points to May 2031, almost exactly to Passover week, when Jesus was crucified on May 25 in the year AD 31, clear as day. If you zoom in on this tip, the time of this first loop in the west points to just a few days before Passover week in May 2031, maybe even exactly to the days when Jesus spoke those prophetic words in Matthew 24. Either way, that's mind-blowing. And now, one of our most important Bible studies, our article series, Shadows of Gethsemane, has been confirmed in the heavens by Jesus' very own words. Because if you count backwards, using the well-known Christian idea of 2,000 years of New Testament time from the crucifixion until Jesus returns, starting from the year confirmed by the heavens of 2031, then that clearly and 100% confirms the crucifixion year as AD 31. With that, Jesus himself silences anyone who teaches any crucifixion year other than AD 31. And so, once again, you can discern who has studied correctly and who hasn't. Jesus' lightning brings clarity to this issue, don't you think? Now, how do we find the exact day of the general rapture in August 2025, after the lightning has appeared and all the other unique events have been recognized? We already know that the cloud, which received Jesus back in the year AD 31, was the moon playing its role in the firmament. Likewise, it was the moon that formed the cloud for the two witnesses when it stood on F3, as explained in the last article. So, it's only logical that the moon would once again play the same role after the 3 hours of Babylon's fall, this time positioned on F7. Let's take a look. Here we are, August 21, 2025, around midnight, Paraguayan time. And there we find the Son of Righteousness in the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the King, who, after changing his garments, now stands in royal robes directly by the great sickle asterism. And that, of course, is a picture of the great general harvest and rapture. And the Son of Righteousness is calling out loud here, "Come, my faithful ones, I will take you to the place in heaven that I have prepared for you." And the cloud at that moment, that is, the moon, is standing directly on F7. That's the sign of the rapture. Mercury, representing the messenger, that is, Elijah, and the 144,000 who will see Jesus alive, is located in the eye of Cancer. That reminds us of a verse. "Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed." Here we have that moment, that twinkling, clearly highlighted in heaven, marked at just the right time. This constellation, Cancer, was also known as the manger, or the beehive, or crib in ancient times. Cancer was considered the gate of heaven, a kind of portal. You can look it up on constellationsofwords.com. It goes without saying that the first general resurrection as described in the verses we just read, would have to happen before August 21. So what's happening in the heavens on August 20? Here's August 20. We find the moon in Pollux, the twin who represents the king with royal garments. You remember the garment change. That's where the waning silver crescent moon activates the small sickle in Pollux's hand, which represents the first resurrection. Ellen White writes that when Jesus returns, he is seen holding a sickle in his right hand and a silver trumpet in his left hand. His feet had the appearance of fire. In his right hand was a sharp sickle. In his left, a silver trumpet. Indeed, that fits perfectly. Pollux holds a sickle in his right hand here, and the silver moon in his left hand, exactly where the trumpet would be. With that trumpet, Jesus awakens the sleeping saints and harvests them. This moment would also be the perfect time for the sounding of the seventh trumpet, when Jesus, as King of Kings, takes possession of the earth, just like it says in Revelation 11:15, and snatches the justified dead from Satan's hand, and a day later, the righteous living. Go read the trumpet passage again. It fits perfectly. And that would also mean the second woe has to be finished by this point, at the latest. Then it also makes sense that the third woe comes quickly. I think that by this time, the living saints will also cry out, like John once did, "It is the Lord." And that brings us to another mystery that we can now solve. Let's read John chapter 21. Therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved saith unto Peter, "It is the Lord." Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his fisher's coat unto him, for he was naked, and did cast himself into the sea. And in verse 11 it says, Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of great fishes, 153. And for all there were so many, yet was not the net broken. Here I've just done one little calculation. This is the spring equinox on March 20, 2025, which we absolutely need as the starting point of the Jubilee year. That's when the Sun of Righteousness, the symbol of the great fisher of men, stood at the spring equinox point. Now let's add the 153 days that this Bible passage suggests, till the time when, in this Jubilee year, the greatest harvest of Christian souls in the history of the universe is to take place. Where do we land? On August 19 or 20, 2025, depending on whether you count inclusively or exclusively. And right there is where we expect the first general resurrection, or when it begins, which then concludes in the great rapture one day later. The Jubilee year and harvest prophecies of Jesus are among the greatest prophecies the Master ever gave, don't you think? Can you see how God is lovingly leading us and you, all who are looking up, step by step. Now you know about the second coming, without us having to go into great detail. But time is speeding up. Again, Matthew 24 has far more to offer than you might imagine. Let's go ahead and mark this long-awaited event in August on our timeline. You already know this chart, but now these scattered dots on the right side are also connected to the timeline. And I just wrote here quickly, because these days will truly fly by. These are the so-called rapid final moments. I truly hope this video has made as clear as possible what 3i Atlas is pointing to, and how 4i will come to our aid. And if there's anything you didn't understand, please feel free to use our Telegram chat groups. Please reach out, give us feedback, ask questions, as long as there's still time. One last thought. After the garment change in the heavenly sanctuary, Jesus will, of course, leave the temple for good and mount his white horse to return with the armies of heaven, just as we read in Revelation 19. And here's something interesting. And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. Even the mystery of this strange, unknown name that only Jesus knows can now be understood. Not that we know the name itself, but we understand what Jesus meant by it. This image is again from the short video. We do know that Jesus is coming down with the holy city, and that this will be the fourth interstellar object, as we already explained in the last video. But no one currently knows what name humanity, or the astronomers, will give to this object when they discover it for the first time, shortly before August 21. Only Jesus knows who comes with 4i. And that's why we write it as 4i question mark. Because the name of this fourth interstellar object is currently unknown to anyone, except Jesus himself. And since it fits the topic, I'll just mention this too. There's a prophecy that says the holy city will come from the open space in Orion. Who knows? Maybe we should be pointing our telescopes toward the Orion Nebula. We'll see. Reaching the end, we now can answer the question we asked at the beginning. Is 3i Atlas the Doomsday Comet? And we have to say, yes, 3i is the Doomsday Comet. It clearly testifies that the censer, the coals, the hail are on their way. We will recognize soon enough what ultimately and literally causes the lake of fire. But the warning has been given in the heavens, loud and clear. And I hope I was able to tie together many loose threads in this video. And Jesus is coming with 4i question mark, the holy city, to rescue his children from this final hail of fire that will destroy the world, and all those who have not accepted Jesus. Anyone not part of that rescue will definitely have to endure the third and final woe. But to end on a note that touches the heart, for all of you who have journeyed with us through highs and lows, pause here and on the next slide, take your time and read the words with reverence, with hope, and with joy. Let them sink in. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. May his children lift up their heads, because our redemption is more than near. Time on this earth is running out. Please hold on. Amen.